It's September the 4th, 2011. This is 508, a show about Worcester. I'm Mike Benedetti. Today on the show is Virginia Ryan. Hi, Virginia. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Fine, very well, thank you.
Very good. And today on the show, Brendan Malakins.
Morning, sir. How are you?
Stylish as always.
I actually realized after I put this on that I think I've worn this same shirt for the last 3 shows. So I apologize to our viewers that I actually own more shirts. I think it's a scheduling thing.
It's not a bad shirt. It shows up well on the camera.
It's a nice shirt.
So today is one of the shows where we're talking to people who are running for city council this fall. We have some questions that we came up with over the last few months, and we've been trying to ask people the same questions, sort of just to stay focused on the issues that we and the people who watch the show think are important. Today we're talking to Virginia Ryan. You're running for district council, right?
District 1.
District 1, and the incumbent in District 1 is Job Smith.
Correct.
Fantastic. Are you in the preliminary? Is there a preliminary
Yes.
election? That's the 20th of September?
It is.
Okay, so it's like whoever comes out the best in the preliminary goes on to the final election?
2 top ones.
The 2 top people, all right. And there's a third person who is Tony Economo,
yes.
okay. I never know how to say anybody's name. I read their names in the paper, and I have no idea how to say their names. So Virginia, what line of work are you in?
I'm a retired school teacher.
Okay. And you are involved with the Coalition of Worcester Retirees?
Yes, we started our coalition 4 years ago.
Okay.
Fighting City Hall, by the way.
Okay. Is the coalition like a union thing, or what is it?
No, it's not really a union thing, but
Okay.
I wish it was,
Okay.
because then we would have more power.
Uh-huh.
It is basically a coalition that we started with 6 teachers,
Okay.
calling from the MTA offices to tell people to go down to the Municipal Operation Committee meeting that following Wednesday. We were in there on Monday. We got a list from Retired Teachers Association, and we went down and made the phone calls. And because of that, the vote for putting us onto Medicare, Section 18, passing that, was delayed about a month. But I was told personally by one of the counselors, Dennis Irish in fact, that it was not going to be until September that it would be voted. So we started and we said, we have 3 months to fight this. Well, we had a month, and of course we lost because it was already in the budget for...
Okay. But you guys have continued to be a very active organization.
Yes, we
I would
have,
say.
yes.
Okay. What is your position on school privatization?
School privatization, meaning...
charter schools in general, sort of turning control of the schools over to private entities.
Well, I have a problem with that. And I think that people have the right to send their kids to a charter school, but for private people to be running them, privatization, I think, no. And if that's the case, then they take a lot of money out of the public schools budget. So that would be my take on it.
Okay. What is local government's role in regulating the day-to-day lives of citizens, and is there a limit?
Of course there's a limit. And I think we've seen that in Worcester, that this present city council has overstepped that, especially with the smoking ordinance. The smoking ordinance was passed, I think, this past spring.
This is this is the tobacco advertising ordinance,
Yes.
or the no selling tobacco in
no
pharmacies
selling, right,
also. Yeah.
Right. I was a school teacher. I was a biology teacher. I used to tell kids not to smoke when I smoked myself. And they used to say to me, Miss Ryan, you tell us not to smoke, but you smoke. And I said, yeah, and I'm going to go off to the Quincy Bridge this afternoon. You coming with me? But I quit.
Yeah.
And my brothers will tell you that I am a pain in the butt when it comes to, trying to tell them to stop smoking. Didn't matter. They did it anyways until one had a heart attack. He quit the day before. And the other one had peripheral vascular disease. And I said to him, quit smoking, and he did. So the thing is that we all have problems with smoking. I mean, it's a bad habit. Kids are getting hooked earlier and earlier. I think I started at 12. But what you have to do is educate them, especially in grammar school. When I taught at Worcester East Middle School, they had a science fair. When I saw the lungs were out from some pathologist or somebody from UMass, diseased lung from emphysema.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I went over and I said, okay, I knew the smokers in my class. I said, come on over here. And one girl quit because she saw what happened to her lungs.
Yeah.
And I used to tell the kids, you go walking anywhere, or you go into a store and you see somebody with liquid oxygen that they're going around with.
Sure.
Probably smoking. not always, but probably smoking in
Okay.
prior years.
So you have a long history of having troubles with smoking, but you don't feel like this kinds of things the city council is doing.
Right. I quit when I was 38.
Okay.
But the thing is, tobacco is a legal product, and now they're going to prevent the pharmacies from selling cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Germain, Councilor Mike Germain, he made the most sense when he said about his father, how, he used to light up 3 cigarettes by the butt of the previous one. And he said he hasn't smoked. He's made a pact with his son not to smoke. But he knows that people can go from a pharmacy and walk 10 feet over there, and they can get it over another store.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him just to be funny, and I said to him, I think they should also do away with selling candy at pharmacies, because obesity is another problem.
There's a ton of unhealthy stuff you can buy at a pharmacy.
Right,
The dentists would not stand for that. The dentists need the business.
Well, let me ask you. Let me move on to the next question. What is your personal vision for the city?
I would like to see this city back where it was years ago,
Okay.
especially with a vibrant small business community. Small businesses left in droves, and I think one of the reasons is the way they're treated. I have been door knocking. I have met many small business people, and I'll just give you one example. This man told me he had a computer store at Union Station. I think he was one of the first residents in that second floor.
Okay.
And then the city came to him and said, you have to move because we're having the FDR Museum. No help in movement. Do you think he's going to, I think he's still in the city, but he's thinking of getting out. But you don't move out an existing business to move in somebody else. You could find it. There were so many sites downtown that they could have found for the FDR Museum, and probably had gotten more people to go to it too.
Right.
So
Let me ask you, what do you think the city can do to encourage small business?
I think that they have to work with small businesses to make sure they come here. There was an article recently in the Worcester Telegram about Green Street and how I think it was Green Street,
Okay.
and they're doing the street over and they're doing the sidewalks over.
Right.
And there was one shoe store that catered to the elderly, and people can't walk down there. So his business is suffering. You make some accommodation so that his business stays functional and thriving.
Okay. What is your review on the relationship between the city council and the city manager?
I think the city council is not doing its job. I've
Okay.
heard the city manager say, "I have 11 bosses." I don't see them as bosses.
This is actually one concern that I have, is that there's not a lot of leadership coming from the city councilors, and I don't think that there's also like a lot of desire to be leaders from the city councilors, which I guess could be a functional city government if they were all like small government libertarians. But as you point out with the tobacco thing, they're totally not. They're happy to exercise their power in every possible way. They just don't want to exercise any leadership. And I feel like power without leadership would be a good model for many of them. But then somebody has to get things moving in some direction. And so the city manager will become that person if it's not going to be an elected official. Do you feel like you would like to see yourself taking a leadership role as a city councilor, or how would that work?
Yeah, I would like to take a leadership role. I would like to work with the existing councilors and say, hey, listen, we're not treating the people of Worcester, especially the seniors, very well. For example, Joe Casello initiated this voluntary tax write-off program. It's available in every community outside of Worcester. That enables a person that owns a home to volunteer, to not take a union job, but to work in some capacity for so many hours and get up to $1,000 off in some communities.
Okay.
Every community does it around Worcester, and most of the communities. That went to the city manager's desk for a report 3 years ago. It never had a report. This past January, after reading how Gardner reinstated theirs after a hiatus of 10 years, I petitioned the city council, and when I went before him, I said, now, stop me if you got that report. And nobody stopped me. And you know what they did with it? They referred it back to the city manager. We have been sitting at many of the council meetings because we petitioned for coalition bargaining to get the retirees a seat at the table. And they immediately tabled our petition No discussion, no vote. Mike Germain tried to get it off the table.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. So then, like maybe 3-4 months later, Mr. Clancy took the tabled item and filed it into the basket. So this is why, after sitting there a week after week, not the whole council meeting, I understand. We say, oh, here comes another report. You know, they keep asking for reports, and they don't care if they get them back or not.
May I ask you the next question? What do you think about the idea of neighborhood councils?
I think that's a great idea. I think the more people you get involved, and the more people that know what's going on, I think that's an excellent idea.
And would you support neighborhood councils if you were a city councilor?
Certainly would.
Okay. This next question is a long question about money, which Brendan wrote, and so
Come on.
you can sort of
Ignore the whole Feel free to ignore the question.
we need to revise this question to make it more to the point. But I'm just going to read you this question, and then you can kind of take it the direction that you want to take it, and I'll ask some follow-ups if we need to. Where should the city draw the line in taking responsibility for development? Where should the city draw the line when selling off existing assets? How should the city be making its money? And what's the correct tax rate for Worcester homeowners?
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, we could say the first one is like where should the city how much responsibility does city government have in economic development in the city?
Well, obviously they should have more. And
Okay.
obviously the 3 people that were just recently appointed to the economic development, 3 positions that were opened up, but they're only funded for a year. So how if you're in there and you're not funded for the next year, who are you going to attract to those positions?
Yeah.
I think that it's up to the councilors too to put things in. I've seen Councilor Germain do a lot of things. For example, he was the one that asked for the dependent audits of the city people on the health, an independent dependent audit, and
Okay.
that wasn't done. The city manager chose to do it his way, but he comes up with a lot of good ideas because he seeks these out, and I hope that if I'm elected, I'll do the same. And one of the things I was thinking of, Boston has great economic development, and I'd like to go sit down with that person and see how that can translate into Worcester.
So another one of these money questions is how should the city be making its money, and what should the tax rate be for Worcester homeowners? You know, just for people who don't follow this very closely, right now there's sort of different tax rates for commercial property versus residential property in the city, and the tendency has been to pick the lowest. The state decides what the lowest rate you can charge for residential property. Where does that number come from?
No, it comes from the city. The
city.
the city needs to determine its tax levy. The way it works, we determine our tax levy, and then we kind of back that number into the tax levy if it's going to be a split. And it's actually
Okay.
4 numbers too. It's not just residential, commercial. It's
Oh,
actually
really?
residential, free space, commercial, and industrial. In
Uh-huh.
Worcester, we just choose to treat commercial and industrial as the same number,
Okay.
and we don't tax open space.
Okay.
Which strangely a lot of communities do. So like if you think of like say the Greater Worcester Land Trust and like all of the undeveloped land that they own, technically you could pick a number and you could tax that as as taxable revenue generating land as well. We just
Okay.
don't want to put our good friends the Noviks out of business right now, so we'll
Okay.
think that one through a little bit more.
So we have there's a resident there is basically in the city of Worcester at least a residential rate and a
commercial
commercial
industrial,
rate.
yeah.
A commercial industrial rate. Okay. And so I guess so back to thank you Brendan Mellihan for telling me
Going
something
home now,
about
so you have a good day.
information. So basically the question is like where should the city be getting its money from these days? Where should it be looking for new sources of money? And like if God dropped stone tablets out of the sky with a tax rate on them and said this is what I believe that the residential tax rate should be in Worcester, what would that number be?
I'm not going to answer that because I don't know, but let me
Okay.
tell you this. Worcester is $10 million under the tax levy.
Okay.
And they did take $2 million of that because it used to be $12 million. And I think the sidewalks they're fixing, the streets that they're fixing, badly in need, ignored for years, that's a good use of the money. We are only one of 3 cities that is below the tax levy.
Okay.
So there's money there. There's $10 million more.
Wait a second. So what do you mean below the tax levy?
Proposition 2.5 that passed in the 80s And when I first got involved in the teachers union, fighting that, after the after effects of it, when the school department had so many cuts in
Okay.
programs and so on, they can tax to a certain amount.
Okay.
Okay,
The
2.5
city-
the city
the city.
can, but they chose not to, and to have this, as did Cambridge. But Cambridge has a thriving economy, and Cambridge, I think, is about 300 million below tax levy. So, but
So you're saying that the city of Worcester could charge more in taxes
that's
than it
right.
does. Okay.
Yeah, they could go after that money that is below. Now,
Okay.
you can't do it all at once, and I am a supporter of small business, and my father owned a diner
Yeah.
and owned and operated the Sherwood Diner. And I see problems with small businesses because of the dual tax rate. But in this economy, you have to look at the economy, and that's why I came out against for the lowest residential tax rate,
Okay.
whatever it is going to be.
Okay.
I want the lowest. But I think if you attract more businesses in and keep businesses in the existing one,
Yeah.
then you're going to increase the tax base, and that's the way to do it.
Right. So let me ask you this: by having the lowest residential tax rate, you're having a higher commercial tax rate.
That's
is that
right.
And that goes back to what I was saying about, like, so it all starts with the tax levy. Like, so
Okay.
it isn't really the floor that's set by the state or the city; it's the ceiling that's
Right.
set. So, like, this is that's
This
what
is
Virginia
how
was
much money in
mentioning.
taxes you're allowed
There's
to
a
raise.
potential tax levy. Once we determine what that levy is going to be, the overall income for the city, and this is why it's weird that we do this before we even know what the budget's going to be for the fiscal year. Then we back into that number both the residential rate and the commercial rate. So
Okay.
even though those rates are still, like, we use the terms lowest residential rate and highest commercial rate, if we actually tapped into the tax levy that we kind of ignore, which I believe you're correct is 10 million, it would shoot both those numbers up a little bit, right? And that's
Okay.
why if you look at a 10-year history of, or you can go back further, but you look roughly a 10-year history, you can see how that number kind of bounces all over the place. And it goes up, it tends to go up when the economy is good, tends to go down when the economy is bad, and it's because, like, we were talking about this a bit last week, I think, that it's tied to the assessment rate, which is where it ends up becoming kind of made up numbers, right? Because the assessment rate is a byproduct of external forces that
Like the value of property and
exactly,
the housing
which
market.
oftentimes has to do more with the value of surrounding communities as opposed to the healthiness of the local economy.
Right. This is where property values as a proxy for the healthiness of the local economy.
Might actually be a flawed experiment.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. I feel like we had some answer there.
I want to jump back, though.
Go for it.
I want to jump back because this is another example. Can you show this?
Yes.
This
People
is-
are not going to be able to see this very well.
Okay.
This is information about change in assessments on different property in the city. And here we're looking at Brew City on Shrewsbury Street, where the amount of taxes that they were going to pay every year between 2010 and 2011 was going to jump up $28,000. It did jump up
Did.
$28,000 a year because of
An increase in their assessment. They were told it was because of these billboards on the top of the building,
yeah.
which is not even supposed to be in the assessment.
Those are some pricey billboards.
That's private property.
So they
that's
considered
that's
them-
taxed at a different rate.
So
Right.
Increasing the square footage because of the.
There was
or is
no
that-
increase in the square
No, but I mean,
footage.
is that what they're considering the billboards to be square footage? That
I don't
they
know
tax
what
up
they're
to?
doing. I think it was a mistake, and I think they've made a lot of mistakes, and that's why I supported this woman, Joan Kroll, who started this Aware Coalition, and I'm continuing to support it because most people who got an increase, significant increase in their assessment, not their taxes, their assessment, don't even know it.
Right.
And as I door knock, I ask people, and I say to them, did your assessment go up? Especially if they had a cape like I do.
Mm-hmm.
And they do. They did. So I said, you got to file an abatement. In many cases, it was too late because you only got a month after you got the tax bill.
And so we've talked. This is the other thing we've talked about too. Is that for so many people, taxes are something that never comes into the picture because if you have a mortgage, those taxes oftentimes are caught up in an escrow account, right? So you never actually, it's not like you reach into your pocket and pull out $3 or $4 grand a year to pay your taxes. That your mortgage company takes care of that. So when you're paying your monthly mortgage bill, you're paying a small percentage that actually goes into escrow that then pays off your tax bill quarterly. So like I've never actually paid a tax bill. I think I did once when, for some reason there was a mix-up with the mortgage company. So if you asked me right now, Brendan, what do you pay quarterly in taxes? I would look at you and I have no idea. I do know just because from doing the show and whatnot that this year for some reason my assessment went down.
Good job.
That's a rarity. No, I can't figure out for the life of me why that did. For most people, it's going through the roof, and they're not catching on to it because it's a significant amount of money that the average person doesn't actually lay their hands on when they're paying it out.
Right. So the suggestion here is that people should be, if they're not aware of what their assessed value is, they should be checking that out and then attempting to take steps in case there's some sort of gigantic problem.
It might only be $100 or $150 a month that's coming out of your monthly mortgage payment when you add that up as a yearly lump sum, or $200, whatever it may be a payment. It is a significant amount of money. It is it's the primary source of revenue for the city, right? So I mean, it is something that we should all kind of be keeping an eye on.
And I'd like to add one more thing.
Sure.
Most people's assessment went down this year.
Yeah, that's
because of the fact that their assessment value was based on the sales in 2009. There were some people like Assessor Ford whose went down significantly.
Okay.
But he
did.
did.
The assessor's assessment went down.
Uh-huh.
I wonder how that happens.
I don't know.
How does that happen, Mike?
I don't know.
How does the assessor's assessment?
I have no comment. I know nothing about this.
Somebody needs to assess the assessor.
But anyways, people, you can easily check your assessment. You go online, the city website, you click on public documents, then you click on property values. You can scroll down and scroll your street. Boom, you have everybody's assessment on your street.
You can even look at strangers' assessments.
That's right.
You can.
It's kind of creepy.
It is kind of.
You can find out a lot of
It's fun.
information about people in the city by just playing around with the city website.
The internet's a powerful thing, Michael.
Virginia, I'm going to ask you two policy questions and then two
Right.
non-policy questions, and then I think we'll be done with the show today. Would you support zoning changes to encourage mixed-use, diverse development of existing neighborhoods to encourage walkability?
Yes.
Okay, and that's a good answer. And I wanted to ask you about your work with the Coalition of Worcester Retirees, because I think there's a line of argument which I'll attempt to faithfully say here, which is that for the financial health of the city, it's one of the things that the city can actually do is like negotiate hard with the unions, because that's like a big part of where the city budget is spent, is people who do work and those people are unionized. And that somebody who's coming from a background of being a union person or in a semi-union organization like the Coalition of Worcester Retirees is just going to sort of weaken the city's bargaining position with the unions. And so
It hasn't happened in all of the other communities which have adopted coalition bargaining,
Okay.
which are many in Massachusetts. And by the way, they did not adopt coalition bargaining just to give the retirees a seat at the table. In every case, they have the reason for adopting it is because the city or the town made money. For example, Quincy has half the population of Worcester
Okay.
and half the retirees of Worcester.
Okay.
They saved $10 million
Okay.
when they went into coalition bargaining.
What do you think the dynamic is that makes it so that that's a money saver for these communities?
I think it's because, for example, healthcare, the insurance, is skyrocketing, and that's another problem. I think that's the basic problem that has to
Okay.
be addressed in the state, but unfortunately is not being addressed in the state legislature. And therefore it's going to continue, and therefore it's going to be continuing to increase co-pays and deductibles for everyone.
Okay.
But to tell you about coalition bargaining, the city manager wanted all of the unions on 25%, and he negotiated with that.
Okay.
Retirees, we went on 25%.
What do you mean went on 25%?
25% of us, what we call the supplemental plans,
Okay.
all right? Most of us are in Medicare, but there are lots that maybe 25 or 20% that aren't. So you always have to have, with Medicare, you also have to have another plan. And then also with people that are seniors or retirees, they have the option of the plans that the city offers to its employees.
Okay.
But if you were retired on January 1st, 2008, if you were retired, you were paying 25%
Okay.
of the premium.
Sure.
The city manager didn't raise his and the other non-union members, non-union employees at City Hall, to 25% till 18 months later. I have a problem with that. But anyways, the coalition bargaining would give retirees a seat at the negotiating table, and that's why we continue. And the manager has said that he'd consider it after everybody was at 25%. Do I believe he will? Who knows?
Mike, you know, I think in a way to answer your question too, like what would be the difference between those communities and Worcester? I think in Worcester we still presume that collective bargaining, the relationship between collective bargaining and the administration needs to be an adversarial relationship, which is a falsehood, right? I mean, and it's kind of like announcing in advance that we're going to have a knife fight here, which means that you know someone's going to sneak in a gun, right? Like if you announce in advance what the rules are going to be, someone's going to go to break them. So I think a lot of communities have realized that collective bargaining doesn't need to be an adversarial relationship between the administration and the unions, that if you can actually work together, you end up with an employee base that respects its relationship with the city, but also realizes no one's going to be reaching into their pocket and grabbing as many nickels as they can before anyone realized what happened.
I'm going to ask two non-policy questions, and then we can do a follow-up if we have any few minutes. Have you ever seen the TV show The Wire?
No.
Okay. Well, that's a legitimate answer. I never would encourage anybody to watch TV. Somebody actually the other day asked me, what is The Wire? Because we always talk about this on the show when we're talking to these people. It's this HBO show about the city of Baltimore from a few years ago. It's one of these shows that people like geek out on so much that if you have a friend who's watched The Wire and you ask them about The Wire, they're gonna like talk to you about the show for 20 minutes.
They're graduate level courses.
It's a good show. It's a very interesting show because it's all about it's like a cops and robbers show, but it spends a lot of time discussing municipal dynamics. Although I don't know if it talks about union pension bargaining kind of stuff
The
on the
union
show.
stuff comes up with season 2.
Season 2,
with,
the dock workers.
With the dock workers,
All
but
right.
also in season 4 when they go through education. They
That's
talk
right.
a lot about the power struggles between teachers and the administration.
The other question is, do you know how much you can bench press?
What?
Lifting weights. No?
You know I want to do it now?
we
We're gonna have a fight. That's
We always talk about how we should bring the bench out and find this out. I don't know.
You know what? I do a lot of gardening. I did a lot of gardening. I wish I was in the garden right now, actually, because it's so relaxing. But I'm determined to hit every street in this district and door knock and talk to as many people as I can. But to answer your question, I don't bend.
You don't like do weightlifting.
No.
Or anything like that.
But what
Okay.
I do is take bags of 40
soil
soil and everything else and put them in my garden. So
All right. You're pretty strong.
yes, I am.
All right. We probably, we'll see after the preliminary. Maybe we can get everybody out here and we can just figure it out.
Does that mean I have to get practice?
I don't know. You can think about how you want to prioritize your time until then. Do we have any more questions for Virginia? We have
don't
about
think so.
2 minutes left. All
No,
right. Do you have anything else? We have about 2 minutes left if you want to say one quick thing.
I want to say one quick thing
Go
is
for it.
get out and vote on primary day. There's on the 8th of September, there is a debate between all three candidates at Zion Lutheran Church
For District 1.
for District 1.
All right.
And I just read about the abysmal turnout in District 3.
Oh my goodness.
If you want to be informed, if you want to know the differences in the candidates, make sure you come to that debate.
There you go. District 1, we're going to be watching. You need to step up or we're going to call you out on this show.
Or two?
We have 1 minute left.
Well, real quick, I mean, the one thing that we haven't talked about, now I think you might be one of the first district councilors that we've talked to, is Asian longhorn beetles. Real quick, I mean, how do you think that's been handled? That seems to me it's a huge issue for your district and only your district.
I think it's been handled very poorly in the Greendale Burncoat area. I live in the Burncoat area. As I go through the west side, because I did the Ward 2 where I live, knowing that I don't want to be hot and humid and hot and sweaty every day.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing the west side, and if I talk to somebody, I say, "You see these maple trees here? If they're not inoculated, sooner or later, the ALB will get them." The USDA said that they were going to inoculate for 3 years. They haven't. They've only inoculated for 1 year, and they stopped the program. There's something wrong with that. I've done the research. And the communities where they've eradicated, it takes 10 years. For example, Chicago, Staten Island, and these other places, they have eliminated the ALB by inoculations. One man, top of Fail Street, beautiful, standing on a stoop on
You got about 30 seconds
Okay.
left.
Anyways, he paid for his trees to be inoculated the first year. Second year, USDA did it. This year, he did it again. They're still looking for the ALB. Every tree around there, every maple tree has been cut down.
You know how much that costs by any chance?
It was, he's got 4 birch and 1 maple. It was $400, he told me.
For all of them?
Yep. And you know what? If I had known that, I would have had my city tree
Like we need
inoculated.
to start an inoculation business.
$100 a tree.
$100 a tree.
Not a big deal. Virginia, thanks for being on the show. Good luck. Everyone, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next week.